Sup, future shredlords? Welcome back. Death of the Fingers. I know I'm supposed to be putting up that instructional video, but I was out hanging out with some friends and a fight broke out and the guy got punched in the face and then he fell back and he basically headbutted me with the back of his head after he got rocked right in the mouth. So I had to go to the dentist this morning. My gum is all messed up and so is my lip. 2025, boys, it's just not been my year for the health situation. I don't know what the hell. That's the first time I've been out in a year. So, note to self, stay home more. You become even more of a hermit. But I don't have the will to finish that video today and get it out. So it's going out on Sunday. But I did want to talk about this other thing first, and it sort of stems from this scene from Conan the Barbarian 1982 where Conan gets captured at the Mountain of Power. He's having a conversation with Thulsa Doom. He's beating the crap out of him, whatever. And he's like talking about the riddle of steel. He's like, what is steel compared to the flesh that wields it? And that's honestly a sort of a very insightful comment about the power of the mind. You know, the sword is an inanimate object. It's the mind that actually, you know, controls the hand to reach out, grab it, and do all the moves and refine them and perfect them and become fast, you know, and then intelligent about how to attack and defend and all the rest of that stuff. It all stems from the mind, right? So when you start to see things like that, you know what I mean? It kind of changes your perspective because you're no longer led around by the nose. You know what I mean? Instead, you have more of this sense to be like, well, maybe I should sit and think about this stuff first. And so there's a lot of warning signs right now going on in society. And so the question immediately becomes this is, you know, how important is music in the big picture, if you will, when basically we're going to suffer a social calamity that we've not experienced in like 200 years? You know, like there's just so many problems, and I wouldn't call them problems. I'm just like, there's so many situations now that are just almost incomprehensible. Whole towns colonized by other groups of people up here in Canada. There's one called Brampton that's very famous with the Indians. It's so famous that this guy went to India. It was asking Indians if they knew about Brampton, Ontario in Canada. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I was there. Random Indians on the street in some town. So, I mean, obviously these are more well-to-do. You know, they're not in the grass hut villages. These people would have gone to school and stuff. But still, you know what I mean? There's that. I saw some footage from Dearborn, Michigan. I'm just like, wow. There's the stuff going on over in the UK, too. I'm just like, you know, Germany's another one. France is another one. I'm just like, the old way of life that we used to embrace and stuff like that is quickly being subsumed into something else. I don't know what that is, but there's this insatiable desire by the powers that be, if you will, to sort of thrust us into this incredibly uncertain future. Right? We're playing with things we don't really understand. Putting whole groups of people, whether they're Africans and Europeans or Muslims and Americans or Indians and Canadians, pick it, you know what I mean? Muslims and the British people. And that Muslims, that's a huge swath of, you know what I mean? So, I mean, we do know what happens. Somebody was like, yeah, I know, it's right here in the Bible. They're like, God's like, it's imperative to keep the 12 tribes apart and sort of allow them to have their own space, basically. You know what I mean? I'm just like, okay, so even in biblical times, we understood like homogenous societies work better. They develop their own problems. Like there's no perfect society. But it's those problems are much more manageable than when you have a situation like what we have. Because things are just starting to spiral out of control. You know what I mean? you see the Dearborn stuff, there's 50,000 people there. I didn't see a single American flag. And a lot of them were carrying flags that I thought I recognized from 1990 when we were fighting those people over there in Iraq. So, right or wrong, I'm not trying to be making a moral judgment here. I'm just saying, first it was a flag that you saw in Iraq, in Iran, and Syria, and places like that where there's all this tension, this religious tension going on. Well, now that flag's being carried by thousands of people in Dearborn, Michigan. Well, that's a little bit closer than Iraq and Iran or Syria. You know what I mean? So we don't really know what that means. And let's be real, like over the 4 years that Joe Biden was the president, and it's been happening for like the last 50 years. So it's not Joe Biden's fault exclusively, but he was probably one of the worst people there in this respect. Millions of people walked across the border. We have no idea. A lot of them Chinese nationals too. So, I mean, there's plenty of blame to be spread around, but we don't really know what's going on. And that's my point. What does music matter when all of a sudden one day the substation that feeds, half your town goes down because somebody's angry that we didn't support their preferred political candidate in a country 6,000 miles away? Which seems to be what's happening. They get angry about something, or they hate our society or something like that, and then they just lash out. Irrationally. They don't care. It doesn't matter. I don't know what that means, but you know what I mean? It's like Russian roulette. Eventually, the odds keep getting slimmer and slimmer, right? So it's just, it's important to be cognizant, and that's just it. There are basic life skills that we've completely obliterated in the name of dependency, and you can see that the government has been so insidious in wiping out. I watched the most insane documentary about a month ago on the birth of the supermarket. My jaw hit the floor. I was like, this is an invention from the 50s? It's not even 100 years old yet. And I'm just like, before that, it was like, go to the farmers. The farmers would come to town. They'd bring their meat and sell it at the butchers. You know what I mean? Like, it was go to these places individually or just go to like a town square and get your food grown naturally with sweat and toil and all the rest of that good stuff. But there's none of this get all in your hazmat suit and break out the Monsanto products or whatever, Bayer, DuPont, whoever, I don't know. You know what I mean? Which is why you had basically no incidences of cancer and countless other sort of health issues and whatnot. But that's another video. But my point being is, you know what I mean? Like we took that away. We wiped out all those jobs. Canada used to have 130,000 dairy farms. And a lot of them were just little mom and pop operations. So we came up with this sort of government scheme, if you will, called supply management. But the end result is over the last 30 years or 40 years or whatever it is, that's gone from 130,000 down to 9,000. Now that's a drop. This program that you implemented that was supposed to protect all these people, it just basically wiped out like over 80% of them. Way more than that. Who knows? Right? So I'm just like, this is helping? Again, the draconian sort of approach with respect to pasteurization and just buying raw milk. Now listen, I'm not advocating for any of it. Do what you will. You want to get your milk that's pasteurized? Fine. Go buy that. But if you want raw milk because reasons X, Y, Z, and the farmer's like, yeah, no problem. Here you go. And they follow some basic, basic safety precautions. But the understanding is listen, there's a risk. It's like smoking cigarettes. Then there it is. Transaction complete. It's none of the government's business. But of course, up here in Canada, they go nuts. They go nuts. Look at the ostrich farm thing. I mean, look at the absolute circus going on over there. But that's just it. Learning the law. That's the next one, obviously. There's subsistence, that all these skills necessary: canning food, preserving food, growing food, tending to livestock, basically starting fires. You know what I mean? Surviving. Those are all lost arts. If the power goes out, you'd have like about 4 or 5 days worth of, relative kind of tranquility, and then things would start to escalate. And by the end of 2 weeks, you'd have basically full on war if things didn't return to normal. You know what I mean? You'd have people fighting each other for resources because they're just going to run out. Let's be absolutely clear. We don't make enough food to feed ourselves. We don't have the manufacturing capabilities anymore. We ship them all off to Asia to basically can the food and distribute it. Nothing. We don't have any of those capabilities anymore. Not in the United States, not in Canada. Think about Canada invested so monstrously into canola oil and canola products and stuff like that, or just the plant itself, and was selling it almost all exclusively to China. And then one day this year, China's like, we don't want your canola anymore. And that just tanked a $5 billion industry. Now we have all these farmers that are ultra specialized in growing canola, and all these fields and everything else like that with specialized equipment to harvest canola and process it and all that stuff. And instead of it being usable, arable land to grow food and stuff like that, and people with the expertise and knowledge to be able to do that, what we have is useless fields full of product nobody wants, because there are plenty of other countries that can easily undercut our price because we're psychopathic and we have things like the carbon tax and we believe in climate change and all the rest of it. Basic economics. They don't give a shit in China. So they'll just fire up the 1950s tractor and just harvest all of that canola and just get her done. There's like 3 grades. The rich grade, the sort of middle class grade, and then the stuff for poor people. And you see what they do there. Go watch some documentaries on Chinese street food and you'll be like, damn, bro, what's going on? India is just as bad. I'm just like, bro, what, how are these people, how do you get to 1 billion when that's like a practice that you have there? It's just absolutely insane. Can you honestly say that you would eat that food? I can't. Honestly, I'd just be like, no, negative. When you grabbed it with your hand there, no offense, I've done it myself, but it's okay when I do it and put it in my own mouth. When you do it, you know what I mean? Negative. So yeah, these essential life skills and stuff like that. Building a fire, you would think that would be fairly common sense. I bet you 99% of people would fail to actually build a fire under stressful conditions. Even if they were provided with like reasonable sort of stuff, like matches and all the rest of that, waterproof matches and all the rest of that stuff. It's like a Survivor situation. There's a classic one where they had the girls and the boys, and the girls didn't have any survival skills, and they basically called in the medics by like the end of the first week or whatever it was. And they were just miserable, getting pummeled, but the boys were fine. They had fire, they had shelter. They were working away every single day. And that's my point. You know what I mean? Like, men had that industrious nature, and now we've converted half the population of men into, I don't know what, podcasters and other things. So, you know what I mean? That's a bit of an issue. Even growing food and stuff like that, tending livestock. I'm thinking that might be important. Right now in 2025, I'm thinking that's really important. Considering the way things have been going, considering where we're headed, considering the kind of rhetoric we're hearing, subsistence has to be way high up on the priority list. And that's just it. You should be diversifying your training, if you will, not just in terms of music, but also in terms of learning these crucial life skills, even if it is just collecting material. Like I picked up the wild asparagus. That's basically how to identify, hundreds of edible plants in North America. I got like this really cool sort of like very useful survival guide thing, but it's only like 50 pages. Like the most usable sort of survival stuff, the most tried and true techniques. You know what I mean? Like these almost never fail. This is collected from like hundreds of videos, thousands of testimonials, and all the rest of that stuff. These are the 50 pieces of information when it comes to surviving in the woods or whatever it is that you really need to know. Even the book itself, you could throw in a backpack. If you got thrown into the lake and whatever, it would survive easily. It's got like these weird plastic sheets and stuff. So it's really cool. I was like, that's brilliant. It's like this big, it's tiny. It's absolutely perfect. That's what I'm talking about. Even if you're going that far to do stuff like that. The other one is obviously if you're starting to do that, you can see how tyrannical the government is. Like they're just going crazy. The ostrich farm one should have been a big one. Listen, first thing you do is take the city or the municipality or whoever it is off your municipal land deed. Go to the Land Registry Act or whatever they call the law in your county or whatever it is, and do some research and then look at your land deed and whatnot and figure out who the legal players are, and then have yourself transferred over as the absolute title owner, because you can own property to the exclusion of all other people. That's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, they changed it around a little bit when they did it in the international covenants, but that principle of just owning something to the exclusion of anybody else goes back as far as time itself, right? Obviously. And so it's a legal sleight of hand, and that's an easy thing to fix. You pay a few bucks, you fill out a form, you get it done, and then all of a sudden you've created a layer of protection that it prevents the government. Put up a few no trespassing signs. Go read the law and what it says about what's trespassing. Go read some court cases about what the court has said about trespassing, or watch a video, or how to make sure you're covered. So if people come on your property illegally, you can go after them in court. I watched a brilliant one from about 4 years ago. These kids were motorbiking all over this guy's property. Now, listen, it was kind of a douchey move on behalf of the the land guy, because it's just like a logging road, and they're on like these little 200cc bikes and stuff. They weren't doing anything, just 14-year-olds bombing around. But bottom line is when the cops showed up to arrest the kids, they're like, you can't do anything. And he knew everything. He had it all down. He pointed it all out, and the cops are like, they arrested the kids right then and there. That's my point. You see what I'm saying? That guy knew and was prepared, and he knew the law. And that's a really important thing that you have to know. Most people are like, I don't want to. It scares me. But when you get into human rights stuff, which is literally the only law you need to know for the most part, except for certain aspects with respect to contract law, if you're getting into contracts, or criminal law, which I think most people understand, you can pretty much steer clear of that if you're just a decent moral person. So, you know what I mean? Property rights and activating your inalienable rights is the most important thing you need to know with respect to the law. How the international covenants interface with your domestic laws, starting to figure that out. Doing the subtle changes necessary, noticing the government to prepare and defend your interests in the case that they decide to fire up the legal lawfare. And they do all the time. And that's just it. If you knew how to take care of your business, it's over. So now you have subsistence taken care of. Shelter is obviously part of that. But if you're smart, you buy yourself, 5-10 acres. I think the bare minimum you need, and that I imagine 10 acres is a pretty good amount, is about 10 or 15 acres worth of land. That's not that expensive. That's probably like $20,000-$30,000. You can easily slap up a structure for less than $150. It's not glamorous, but it basically gets the job done, and you'd be completely self-sufficient at that rate. If you drop $250, you'd have substantive luxury and access to basic modern amenities. That's not too bad either. So you're talking for less than 300,000. Most houses in the town where I live in, they go for $1 million. Change the land deed over to your name as the absolute title holder. You avoid all property taxes, because now the county or the province or anybody else, the city, the municipality, can't claim that you're leasing from them. No, the property and the house all go together. It's under my name now, so I don't owe anything to you. True story, kid. Go look at the Municipal Act. You'll see that you're incorporated as a body corporate. That's an interesting one. Especially in Canada, it says it right at the beginning. And you can see it in the criminal code too. Look under the definition of municipality, of which all the inhabitants are incorporated. Oh, okay. The inhabitants are incorporated into the municipality. Why? Property taxes, municipal bylaws, human rights basically defeats all that stuff. When you start slapping up your house and the building inspector shows up and says, you're not allowed to do this. You don't have any permits. You're like, I don't need permits. I don't need your permission to do things on my own property. Imagine the 1700s, but with more of the sort of legal systems to protect your interests advanced at the 2020 stage. You know what I mean? And that's true. The stuff that was true about property rights in the 1700s is true today, because I see court cases regularly cite other court cases from the 1800s, which they themselves cite property right sort of common law principles that date back to the 17, the 16, and the 1500s. This stuff goes back thousands of years. Half of our legal system itself comes directly from the Roman system. That's literally where our system of law comes from. Jus civil. Jus cogent, which is international peremptory norms, basically human rights that are incontrovertible with respect to statutory law, meaning the government cannot force you to do things like take the COVID-19 vaccine or fire you. Yeah, true story. Or a whole bunch of other things, especially based on conscience. Check that one out. Article 18, baby. And free speech too, Article 19. If you really want to dive into what the limitations are, you can also look up the UN comments on Article 19 on any sort of search engine and go read what they've said about it, the general comments, and you'll be like, wow. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that the government says that they can censor me on, they don't actually have the authority, and that's just it. You can now file a lawsuit against them and basically restore your speech rights, restore your property rights, restore your dignity as a human being, give you personal autonomy, protect your interests. Most of the time it's writing a letter or filing with a public notary, a declaration or something like that, just claiming all of your rights. Once you do stuff like that, the government basically sees you as off limits because it's a real pain in the ass to prosecute a person like you. I've told the government multiple times, no, I'm not doing your stuff. They're like, do this or we'll put you in jail. I'm like, no. Cite human rights, send them a letter, and I never heard from them again. Done it twice now. Now, who can say, maybe in the future, because you can never say never, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, we'll take it on, that's fine. You want to go to court? Fine. You want to give me more money in court fees when I beat you down viciously for this stupid nonsense after I told you no the first time? Not a problem. That's the whole point. By sending them the letter, now I can enter that letter into the evidence with respect to the court proceeding and be like, I already told them no. And now they can't say that I didn't say, leave me alone or else there'll be consequences. What's steel compared to the hand that wields it? The mindset is you have to basically set yourself up to be a survivor. And if you noticed anything from with respect to the COVID-19 stuff, like when people started to panic, it was with respect to toilet paper, but you saw the dynamics there. When it was the summer of love in 2020 and after the whole George Floyd thing, you saw the dynamics of a riot. Just burned down half the city. They don't even care that it was mostly people from their own neighborhood that they're burning the businesses down. Businesses that they're like, oh no, we needed that. That's where we get our prescription drugs. And the company's like, and the franchisee's like, I don't think I want to move my business back there again. Jeez, I wonder why. Okay, so when things start to go south, it happens fast. And the intelligent person, if you are intelligent, will look at the million-headed hydra and be like, there's no way I can fight the behemoth that is the government. The best thing you can do is flee. Flee to a place where you can subsist and defend. And then wait for the smoke to settle and the smoke to, stop rising and the dust to settle and all the rest of that. And then sort of peek your head out from your bomb shelter and be like, okay, it looks like things are calming down and figure out what to do then. Don't wait until the last minute to be like, maybe I should have some food on hand or water or some basic medicines or literature on hand to help me basically deal with the situation, or be physically unfit or unhealthy. You're not exercising, you're not eating well, you're not taking supplementary sort of products like vitamin A, D3, K2. You can take stuff for your mind like Lion's Bane is awesome. And the St. John's wort is great. I'm using this other one too called ashwagandha. Fantastic. Also controls cortisol, stuff like that. Most people are basically highly nutrient deficient. So the point being here is just like we talk about with music all the time, to be prepared and think about it and lay out your trajectory and plan out each step and sort of meet your goals. You should be doing that in the real world too, where you're like, I need to get out of the rat race. Music will always be my passion, but I would be perfectly fine sitting there for the rest of my life working on classical music on my 8-string classical guitar and just doing that than recording music or releasing it or anything else. I always only ever did music because I loved it. I didn't care if it got me validation from other people. And I still don't. I've released music to zero fanfare or anything like that, which is fine. That's what you should expect. But having said that, that's just the brutal reality. Music is a total secondary consideration, considering the total wacko-ness of the modern world right now. And it's incredibly important for you to prepare yourself for the realities of the new future that's coming about. And I don't want to be the cause of people basically being like, being the ostrich and burying their head in the sand and being like, no, I don't want to listen to this stuff. I spoke my piece. My index finger is feeling really good. By the end of the month, I think we'll be back to playing. And then the guitar videos are going to start, and then we're not going to ever talk about this stuff again, but I put it out there. And I've talked about it many times on this channel, even though it's mostly a music channel, because the important thing is music is just an extension of you, the person. And you, the person, is only viable in terms of a music setting as long as you're healthy, able, right? And you're not in a situation where you're competing for survival. It's a luxury sort of activity. It's not crucial. Once you start getting hungry, believe you me, your desire to want to play guitar drops down real quick. There's the video. I know 7 of you will watch it. Slam that like button. Show YouTube you care. Right. So on Sunday, be checking that one out, Unifying the Systems. It's going to be really killer. And we'll see you then.